We're going to talk about claims, coverages, what do you do in the event that there is a claim. We're going to toss back and forth between home insurance and auto insurance because most of the stuff is going to be similar. If there is a major change between the two different policies, I'll definitely point that out. So we're just going to go over basically some coverages, claims, the different types of claims, like there's minor claims, severity of claims, and then how does that play as far as your deductible, and how does it play out as far as your renewal rate. Okay, and then a little bit later we're going to be joined by a gentleman named Juan Roque. He has a personal story that involved a major accident that he went through. There will also be Josh Wagner, who is a personal litigation attorney. He's going to go over what your legal rights are in the event that you're involved in a serious accident. And we'll go from there. All right, fair enough? Everybody on board? Coverage limits. I'm going to use the board here. Coverage limits. Whether or not you do business with me or another insurance company, ideally this is what you want. You don't want state minimum. I have a pet peeve about state minimum because realistically, Arizona state minimum, it's enough to get you by legally, but that's it. It doesn't really do anything for you. It's not even good coverage, just to be upfront with you, just be point blank. So state minimum on your auto coverage. If you could see this is $15,000, $30,000. Okay, that's state minimum on auto coverage. My company doesn't do it. Most companies don't unless you specifically ask for it. $25,000, $50,000 realistically is the lowest I've seen. This is as far as auto insurance coverage goes. I want you to think about this though. In the state of Arizona, last time I checked, I don't remember, it's 22.3 or 22.4% of all of the drivers on the road are either uninsured or underinsured. Rounded up a tad, 1 out of every 4 drivers that is on the road is underinsured or uninsured. That's a scary thought, okay? Very scary thought. So let's go back to what it means. The first part, because when you look at your policies, your insurance policies, you usually see a little slash in there with 2 numbers. They might take out the zeros, so you might just see something like 15/30. Okay, basically that means the same thing, 15,000. This means how much coverage your insurance company is going to pay in the event that you are at fault in an accident towards an individual person's, for example, medical bills. That's how much they're going to pay if you're liable for it. So $15,000, let me paint the picture for you. I went to the ER, and it's common when you go to the ER, you're going to do they may do a CAT scan. They may do x-rays. If it's an accident, most likely they're going to. ER, CAT scan, x-ray, maybe the ambulance ride. Can you kind of see where I'm going with this? It's going to be a little bit more than $15,000. It's going to be a little bit more than maybe $25,000. I went, it was $80,000. I stayed in a hospital for 5 days. $80,000 is what it was. They didn't cut me open. I didn't have to have a cast. I didn't have surgery. I just stayed there for monitoring purposes. So, $80,000. If you have this type of coverage, the excess, so let's say if you were at fault, you hit me, my medical bill was $80,000. Your insurance company paid me $15,000. Mathematically, I need another $65,000. That's where they come to you in a form of a lawsuit. okay? That's what you don't want. So now you have to go out of your way, hire an attorney to deal with it. That's what you don't want. Ideally, the type of coverage, at minimum, 100,000, 300,000. At minimum. If you have a policy here, look at it, you're going to see what you have. If you don't, go home and check. I'm not saying you have to do business with me. If anything, you're going to call your existing carrier and say, hey man, I need 100,000, 300,000 because I don't like the coverage that I have. Okay. Is everybody following me so far? Don't do it. 300,000, what this means, or even the second half here, what that means is this is per person, this is per accident, total. So if you hit me, I'm good for $15,000 if it's just me in a car. If it's myself and my wife, $15,000 per person, so 15, cannot exceed 30. If you hit myself, my wife, and my 2 kids, basically two of us are good for 15,000. So if my family of 4, if all of us are injured, 30,000 is not going to cover a family of 4. The likelihood of you hitting somebody with more than 1 passenger, it's there. It's very good reality. You're going to hit a husband and wife, you're going to hit a family or whatever the case is. So that's why we need at least 300,000. Everybody good with me so far? Okay. You can go higher. Most companies, they might do 250, 500,000. If you're anybody of any type of importance, which is basically everybody, but in other words, you don't need to be a millionaire to be sued for $1 million. You might want to consider an umbrella policy. Most of the time, $1 million is enough. I don't really see any reason why it wouldn't be, unless you just hit some major celebrity who's really going to take you to the cleaners. This is called an umbrella policy, which basically means if you exceed this limit, the umbrella policy kicks in to accommodate.
Is that like a rider?
It's not necessarily a rider. Some insurance companies might do it as a rider. It's more of an actual second policy. It's really a second policy. These are pretty inexpensive. I've seen these for maybe $200 a year, maybe $150. Really boils down to your relationship with the insurance company. If you're a landlord, if you have multiple houses, umbrella policy is something you definitely want, just in case you're basically exposed to more people. Okay, but it's not a rider. It's actually a separate policy. If you're my next door neighbor and you come up to me for advice, I'm going to tell you, at the minimum, 100,000, 300,000. Everybody's good with that. As far as home insurance, how it ties through with home insurance coverage. Home insurance, you have your coverage A, which is your dwelling, which is going to cover your house in the event of a fire or lightning strike or hail damage or whatever. Dwelling is usually what's called coverage A. B is going to be other structures, sheds, detached pools, if you have a pool or something that's on your property that's not your actual house itself. So other structures. So if you called me and you said, how much is it going to cost to insure my home? I'm going to look up the address because your zip code has a lot to do with it. I'm going to ask you about square footage. I'm going to ask you about what type of garage do you have, whether it's attached or detached or carport or built-in. I'm going to ask you a lot of questions about your home. If it's recent, most likely it's stucco with a concrete tile or whatever. If it's a little bit older house, it might be concrete block with regular asphalt shingles. But I'm going to ask you all of that stuff. Then this program is going to kind of run it. I want to say roughly it's been give and take $100 per square foot. But think of this. Average home in Surprise might be $250,000. It's really close. It's not exact, but it's really close. If we were able to physically pick your house up, move it to Scottsdale, Arizona, put it down, it might be a $400,000 house, but it's still going to be about $250,000 to replace. So market value really doesn't have is not really tied into the actual replacement cost. Because people will say, well, my house is worth more. You know what? It probably is. You probably got a great view, you got a view of the mountains, whatever the case is, but it doesn't cost that much in materials. So to rebuild a brand new home, because obviously we have to rebuild it to 2014 specs, or if it's next year, we got to build it to 2015 specs. Let's say it's $250,000 on a 2,500 square foot home. But market value on your home, let's say it's $100,000. It's entirely up to you what you do. We're obligated to go at least to $250,000. But if you say, no, I want to move out of this neighborhood, I don't like this neighborhood, I'm ready to move somewhere else, we still have to go off of this. Because then they do have to calculate, what is it going to cost to rebuild that same identical home? Should we go ahead and rebuild it? Then if you say, hey, you know, let's say if we actually did the calculation and came out to $223,750, some weird number like that, at that point you could say, you know what, don't build a home, I'm going to take it, I'm moving to Michigan, or whatever the case is. Liability, eventually you're going to get the liability down here. So similar to my previous example of the $15,000, $300,000, recommended amount of liability on homeowners insurance, $300,000 is recommended. I've seen it as low as $50,000. I've seen it as high as $500,000. Some people do $1 million. I haven't seen too many. $300,000. Goes back to my same example of being in a hospital and it cost me $80,000. The difference here is, you know, the previous example had to do with actual automobile wreck. You're at fault for it. But this here is the same thing. It just doesn't involve with anything with a car, and it follows you even outside the house. So if I come over to your house and I trip on your loose step, that's your liability. Okay? If I run into you at Fry's and you ran over me with a grocery cart and you sprained my ankle, it didn't happen at your house, but it's still your liability. It's still your liability. So you do want minimum coverage at least $300,000. Anyhow, going back to the coverage, that's the recommended coverage that you should have. $100,000, $300,000 on auto, umbrella if you want to pay for it and afford it, and $300,000 on the home. What types of claims are there? I'll go over the simple stuff. I'll kind of talk very briefly about the major things. Then we'll let Juan and Josh talk about it. So minor stuff. Let's go over to the auto. And let's say, for example, you guys do exactly what I ask of $100,000, $300,000. If you and I are at Fry's, you're over here and I'm over here, and we back up and we barely touch each other, just barely touch each other, that's an extreme minor claim. We don't need to get law enforcement involved necessarily. We don't need to get, it's entirely up to you if you want to file it with the insurance company. But if you put a chip in my bumper that big, personally me, I'm not going to go ahead head over heels over it. If you just want to say, hey man, here's $50, whatever, okay, we'll go about our ways. The point being, you don't have to file something like that with your insurance company. Save your insurance company for something bigger. The reason being, should you do file this, it's kind of unnecessary, but let's say you do it, and let's say it's just a $50 thing. You filed it, your insurance company is going to have to fight with the other company and say, hey, you had a driver accidentally backed into my driver, it's $50, whatever. You created a lot of work for $50, okay? You could be recouped, but the easier option would be, let me just give you $50 and let's just go about our day. That's the easiest option. If you have like a little door ding or whatever the case is, don't fret about that. That's just everyday life. You can claim if you have to, but I don't recommend it, because the other thing is when you start filing, if you become that person that files multiple times over little things, your insurance company may look at you as a risk at that point. And they might say, this person is eventually going to milk us for a lot of money, and they're going to drop you. I don't mean that meanly. I don't mean it rudely. Unfortunately, that's just how the insurance company works, because, you know, even though I've done insurance for a while, insurance companies, let's face it, they're a greedy business. I have no problem taking your $100 a month, but I'm pretty hesitant on paying you on a particular claim because I have to know all of the facts. Okay, so it is a greedy business. Yes, I'm an agent, I've done it for a while, but it's just a greedy business and nobody likes it. So if you save yourself on multiple small claims, you don't come across as somebody who's going to constantly call and ask the insurance company to help you every step of the way, even though that's what we're supposed to do. Point blank, I hate to say it, they just don't like to do it. That's all insurance companies. Okay. Everybody understand so far? Everybody all right? Okay. So you have a deductible. Most auto insurance companies, or I should say most insurance people or people insured, named insured, have a $500 deductible. Some use $1,000, some use $500. Deductible basically means this is what you're going to be responsible for the event of a loss. If we go back to this little paint nick, $50 is definitely not going to meet my deductible, so you'll get nothing from the insurance company, okay? Because you're responsible for the first $50,000 or $500. Sorry, it's late. That's another reason why you don't want to start fretting over the small things. If somebody steals your iPod out of the car, $100, it's not going to meet your deductible, don't bother claiming it. Just unfortunately, you just got to say, all right, I lost an iPod. So when you get into claims that involve a little more action, like maybe this turned into a dent. So now instead of this little nick, now I've got a dent this big. That might cost a couple $100 to fix. Now it's your judgment call. Go get estimates, look at it. If it's a couple $100, do you really care if it's going to be your $500 or not deductible? If a tree falls on your car, same thing. If that's a comprehensive claim, same thing compared to what your deductible is. Everybody okay so far? All right. All right. So now, here's the nitty-gritty part. You don't want to fret too much about the small stuff. Now we start getting a little more serious. $500 deductible. Let's stick with that. This is the scenario. You should be at $100,000, $300,000. You could have a $500 deductible. Very few people do $1,000, but it exists. Some people do less. On average, let's say state average, $500 deductible. Now, we're getting into more serious stuff. You get into an accident, and it's not a total loss. Let's just break it down to more than a fender bender. It takes off your hood, the front quarter panel, it's dented, whatever the case is. Still no injuries, just the car, okay? Just the car. It's definitely more than $500. You definitely want to call. A police report needs to be filed because the police report's going to dictate who was at fault. Whether it was you are at fault, the other person's at fault, because that really matters on how it goes on your driver record, but it also determines how the insurance company is going to pay. When you have, this means what you're going to pay the other person, okay? If you hit my car, for example, I'm just throwing this out there, and you did $5,000 worth of damages, I'm going to call my insurance company, and I'm going to say, hey, I got hit, I shopped it around, and it's going to be $5,000 to fix the car. They're going to verify that with the other insurance company. So they're going to verify it with yours. They're going to make sure you're good for it. Usually something on this scale, it's pretty cut and dry. This insurance company wants to hurry up and pay the $5,000 and just get it done with, okay? Again, no injuries involved. We don't need to worry about, my neck or back or anything like that. Let's go back to the part where I told you sometimes the insurance company starts getting a little picky on how much they want to pay out. This is where they become greedy. Unfortunately, I hate to say that, but it is the way it is. I want to take your money, but I don't want to give you any money. Not me personally, but. So, situations like this is where you're going to need to rely on, if you're having, an insurance company is going to call you. The other person's insurance company is going to call you. They're going to try to get you to talk a certain way. They're going to try to get you to say certain things. Everything you say actually does get recorded, gets listened to, and also plays part on how to proceed with your claim. If they kind of trapped you into saying, oh yeah, I was at fault, maybe I did go too fast, guess what? Now it's on you. Okay? You have to be careful with what you say. So now we start talking about somebody like Josh back there, getting him involved. What to do. Let him kind of talk you through it, which he'll talk in a little bit. You get into an accident. Now we're talking about $10,000 for the accident. As you see, I'm kind of building it step by step. So let's say it's $10,000 for the accident. You hear the terminology, my car got totaled, or whatever the case is. That's usually because the actual cost of the car, or of the accident, was more than what the car was worth. So let's say my car, it's only worth $8,000. But the estimate and everything was $10,000. Car's total. Basically, the insurance company is going to cut me a check for $10,000. I'm going to be carless. Now I have to shop for another car. Okay. Everybody's fine with that. Okay. Same accident. Now we're going to add another element. What's pretty common when you get in an accident?
Whiplash.
Whiplash. Neck injury. So, same accident. Neck injury. This becomes personal injury. I'm not going to dive too deep in it. I'm going to give you a brief overview because this is where I'm going to have Josh kind of take over and go more into detail on how he handles it. I'm going to tell you what insurance company handles it should you not incorporate somebody like him, and then we're going to let him handle it or talk about what happens when he handles it. Okay. Now we got neck injury. It could be immediate. I'm not a doctor, but it could be immediate. But I had a friend last week, he got hit, and he was like, no, man, I'm okay. Luckily, he was okay. But I have seen people get hurt 3 days later. It really wasn't the fact that they got hurt 3 days later. They got hurt when this accident happened. They're just not feeling it until 3 days later. There's a little injury there that didn't really hit them, or they didn't feel it until that time. Okay? Whiplash, sprained ankles, sprained wrists. Maybe they got a busted nose from the airbag going off. Maybe they got a little cut, something like that. I'm not talking about anything serious at this point, like arm loss or brain damage or anything like that. I'm just talking a good accident that did a little bit of damage to you as a driver. So we got a neck injury. So if I got a neck injury and I just want to listen to what my insurance company says, I might go see a doctor. Typical doctor, I'm going to go see a chiropractor, let him look at it. Chiropractor might, I don't know, run up $20,000 worth of treatments on a treatment plan to fix it. My favorite, this is my favorite, I'm sorry to say this, but my favorite thing is, now I have mental anguish. Such a cool word. I'm so torn up about this accident. I just got this mental anguish. I'm just traumatized me. This does have a dollar value to it. I don't know, let's say 30,000. So now this one neck injury can total, I got $10,000 for the car, but now I got $50,000. The insurance company, again, I hate to say this, but the insurance company is going to challenge these things. They're going to ask you, did you really need to go see this chiropractor? If so, let me see his bills. We're going to dissect the chiropractor's bills. We're going to look at it and say, okay, was this treatment necessary? Was this stuff necessary? Maybe it was, but there's also insurance fraud out there that some doctors say, oh, this is an opportunity for me to score some money. I'm not saying you're a doctor. I'm just saying it's out there. So we're going to dissect this. We might not justify $20,000. We might justify $5,000. Same thing with this. We might not even consider this an issue, so you might not get anything for that. This is what insurance companies are going to do. They're going to call you. They're going to talk to you. They're going to say, hey, I'm with ABC Insurance Company. You know, our driver's the one that hit you. Let's talk about that accident. They're going to try to trap you into saying certain things because they're going to use those words against you. They're going to use that to point the finger at you, like, okay, well, maybe you were going too fast. Sure, our driver was at fault, but maybe this could have been prevented had you slowed down 5 miles an hour. They're going to try to push you the other direction because they don't want to pay $60,000 if they could pay just the 10. Does that kind of make sense there? All right. So I did have a buddy, long time ago. He lost the tip of his pinky, like just where the fingernail was in some accident. I don't know how, but tip of a pinky. Insurance called him right away and said, hey, I know our driver hit you. We'll give you $5,000 for the pinky. They'll try to settle on the spot. That's the other thing. They're going to try to settle it on the spot. Once you settle, it's pretty much it's almost a done deal. There might be loopholes or they might be able to get you out of it. I don't know. I haven't seen it happen. But they might just say, here's $5,000. Let's just go about our ways. So what if my pinky belonged, I'm a musician and I need that pinky to perform. It's not a $5,000 pinky anymore. I need more money. But if I agreed to that $5,000, I'm out. I'm done. Okay? So again, when you get into an accident or something, the other company's insurance company is going to call you. And again, they're going to try to trap you into not only what you say, but into a particular dollar amount. A company might be willing to pay 20 grand for your pinky. Maybe. They might be willing to pay that. But obviously, if they can get you to agree to 5 grand, I just saved, not me, but they just saved $15,000 of the company's money. It's greedy. I hate it. It's greedy, but that is the stuff you face in the event of an accident. Everything I just told you that happens even at a $10,000 accident is going to happen to a $50,000 accident with a loss of a limb, maybe your grandkid in the back got hurt. Okay. All of this stuff is still going to apply. An insurance company is still going to fight you over, hey, so what really happened to the kid in the back? And what, obviously you lost your arm, that's a little more obvious, but they're still going to try to fight you on the value of the arm, okay? Again, the same process. If a company does not have to pay you $100,000 and they try to talk you into 20, it's a done deal. You got 20 and everybody moves on. But somebody like Josh, they're not okay with 20. They're not okay with an injury here, the loss of a limb, neck pain, mental anguish. They're not okay with that. So even though your insurance company is going to portray it as, hey, we've got a team of legal people out there to get you a little bit more money, they're really not. The general overview is going to be, they call up your insurance company. They say, hey, John, this is Jeff with ABC Insurance Company. Yeah, case number 12345. I know it's $50,000 worth of injuries. Can we just do 30? Then they duke it out, okay? That's all the legal advice really. That's about as far as it goes. They only tap into actual lawyers should they need to deal with another attorney or should the case actually proceed to court, okay? I'm going to give you the nutshell version of law of numbers, and I'll give you an example because I think the example will make more sense. If you and me, okay? You and me, man and man, just two people. We got a $25,000 car. So if it's just two people, the odds of you and me, one of us getting to an accident and damaging $25,000 is 50-50, okay? Either you're going to get in an accident or me. If we include you, that becomes, instead of 50-50, now it becomes 33%. Realistically, the likelihood of the three of us getting into an accident may be slim, where the odds of him and I, 50-50, that's a big chunk. Now we get you in the mix, now it's 25%, so on and so forth. If we got everybody in the room, everybody in the city of surprise, how many people are in the city of surprise? 50?
120,000.
How much?
120,000.
Okay. So let's say 150 people in this area. A certain percentage of them are going to get into accidents. A certain percentage of them have terrible driving records. A certain percentage of them fit a particular criteria. I'm a homeowner, I'm married, I have 2 kids. Somebody else might just be 39 years old. I know I look 25. But somebody else might just be a single person. They're a little bit riskier, but everything goes into a pool of, and it's typically by zip code. If one particular zip code has more losses, more claims, more accidents than another zip code, the rates are typically there in a higher zip code. To dissect it further, now going to your question, because I'm just kind of setting the stage for it. Insurance company presence. So let's just name off, major insurance company. We have Allstate, State Farm, Liberty Mutual, Farmers. You could kind of see, we start naming off insurance companies. To your point, Allstate may have more customers in this zip code than, say, Farmers will in this zip code. Therefore, the risks involved go closer to the him and me 50-50, therefore the rates are going to be higher and through the roof. Market presence. Liberty Mutual is not quite as big as Allstate, State Farm. So market presence, if these aren't accurate, but say 15%, 15%, 4%, and 4%. They have that percent of the population, but dive in further, what percentage of their customers get in wrecks, make claims, things like that. So it's really a percentage game. Reality is, if one insurance company can have everybody and nobody got in wrecks, obviously the claims are going to drop down, therefore the rates are going to drop down. You guys noticed a rate increase during the hailstorm that happened 2010, right? 2010. The following year, what happened? Rates went up. Because when an insurance company, no matter who it is, when they have to pay out millions and millions of dollars for a hailstorm, the rate's going to go up because the insurance company now has to recoup that cost. So if Allstate, I'm just throwing an example, if they have 50,000 people, State Farm has 40,000 people, Liberty Mutual has 10. If these 10,000 people had to file a claim, all the Liberty Mutual customers' rates are going to go up. If Allstate, of their 50,000 people, if half of them filed a claim, still everybody's going to go up, but not as much because of the law of numbers. Does it kind of make sense? I know I really kind of gave you a big example, but yeah, it's really a law of numbers is what it's called. Your 800 number companies, Progressive, Geico. Nothing negative about the company, okay? Don't get me wrong. Nothing negative about the company. No local offices. There may be local brokers, but if you call, you're going to get an 800 number. You don't have an assigned agent. How valuable is that to you if you need me? Okay? So that's where you need to weigh the odds. These guys, again, not to sound negative, they insure more types of people. Therefore, they have a lot more people. Therefore, they're able to give pretty competitive rates. But now it's a trade-off. Do you want to deal with an 800 number every time you need something? Or do you want to go to a local office and talk face-to-face with somebody? So these guys might be a smidgen more, not all the time, not 100% of the time. But going back to what you were asking is, if everything was equal, now you got to weigh in some other factors. Now, if everything's equal, agent, local agent, claims process, features in their policies, et cetera, then it's just strictly premium. These people that are going to talk, Juan Roque, Josh Wagner, they handle things outside of the insurance world from the agent's perspective. So if you called me, if you were my customer and you called me and you said, hey, I got into an accident, I got whiplash, this, that, whatever the case is, the first thing I'm going to say is, call these guys, okay? They're not your fly-by-night 800, the companies that you see on TV that flash commercials, I mean, legitimate people. So we're gonna let them go over their expertise and what they do in their world, because then it's out of the agent's hands.
Well, good evening, folks. It's good to be here with you tonight. Chris invited us a couple of months ago. We work for a local law firm. I was told we weren't able to say the name because they're filming the presentation, but we handle a lot of local cases. And before we lead off to anything, I really do hope that you would never need our services, because that means that something terrible happened to you. And Josh and I are both Surprise residents, and we never want to see any of our fellow citizens ever have to need us for, horrific car crash or something of that nature. If an accident does happen, it does happen, folks. And it could be very serious. 2 cars collide. You may not feel that bad at first, but it is recommended if you have some significant damage and you feel you may be injured, or even if you're injured on the spot, get a police report filed. Call the police, have them come out. Even if the other guy says, it's not my fault, have the police come out and explain what happened to the police officer. The police officer then will take both sides and do an investigation, and they, at that point, will assign fault. Person will get an accident report, and it'll list the vehicles that were involved. They're listed as units. Unit 1, with that person's information, is typically the unit that's at fault. Meaning, cop said, you started it, you hit. Unit 2, 3, and so forth. It's important for our perspective, because I work in the intake department, so we initially talk to people who've been in accidents before we assign a case to one of our talented attorneys, such as Mr. Wagner. And it's first question we ask is, did you call the police? Was it a report filed? Do you have a report number? Do you have that information with you? Because immediately we start to assess, where are we going to be with this case? When the police are not called and somebody was injured, the first question the attorney's going to ask us when we're presenting the case is, why didn't you call the cops? Why didn't you file a report? So it's very important that that police report get filed, just from the perspective that we get a good sense immediately of who's at fault. Whether the other person denies it or not, if the police officer says that and they cite them and give them a ticket, that gives us a leg up. It helps us. It doesn't mean we won't help a client, because there's other things involved. The police officer doesn't cite anybody. If they don't show up, there could be a lot of other factors. Those are more exceptions. But for the most part, get that report filed. When you do call a law firm, make sure that you are injured, because again, the attorneys are going to sniff it out, and if people try to, come in and try to retain us when they're not really injured, it's going to come out really quick, and we will abandon that case immediately, because we don't get involved in those types of situations. We don't ambulance chase. We're not going to practice that kind of law. So without any more ado, this is Mr. Wagner. I work with Mr. Wagner. He's one of probably the most talented injury attorneys I've seen in my experience. And he'll have all the right answers, and he'll do a good job here. So, Josh.
Well, first and foremost, I just wanted to make myself available to the community. I'm actually a Surprise resident. I don't live too far from here. But I wanted to make myself available, to address any questions that you have and kind of cover generally the topics associated with pursuing a personal injury claim. There's a variety of different types of claims involving real property, automobile accidents, dog bites, etc. When it comes to automobile accidents especially, let it be known that Arizona is a comparative fault state. Okay? So yes, I do sue insurance companies. That's what I do all day long. So your presentation was quite nice, but there are so many factors actually involved in pursuing a personal injury claim, especially a car accident. You would not believe how many clients we actually get knocking on the door who had the same scenario. Hey, he admitted fault, he said he's going to pay us, and then didn't. As soon as he contacts his insurance company, he's telling them another story. Their insurance company is already contacting yours. Now you have a 50-50 dispute, no police report. And the benefit of the police officer, it's more than just having a police officer present. It's more than just believing somebody or not believing somebody. If we lived in a perfect world, sure. You want to take people at their face value. You want to believe that they're going to be honest and pay you. But there's more than meets the eye, because Arizona being a comparative fault state, even if he can prove based on his lies that you're 50% at fault, he'll collect 50 and then he'll have 50 against you. I wouldn't recommend talking to an insurance company until you've talked to a lawyer, especially if there is a bodily injury. Okay, property damage is one thing. The at-fault party is going to be responsible for repairing your car. Okay, you want to look into the damages to the car. I mean, if it's minor, yeah, you could probably negotiate out a deal with the other party. Hey, could I pay this? I don't want to get my insurance involved. But you don't want to negate any injuries. Now, and it's very important to be honest with yourself, what's going on with yourself. You don't want to lie about an injury. That's not what we're here to talk about, because those will get found out and it will hurt you in the long run and could financially cost you a lot of money if you are fabricating an injury. Don't do that. But if you are feeling something, you definitely want the officer there, because he will identify any witnesses, he'll gather the facts, he'll document distance, speed, impact, location, how fast you were going, if you were at a perfect stop, if he was going 30 miles an hour. All that gets documented, so all the facts in a police report, it's more than meets the eye. It's not just about getting somebody there saying he's at fault, but there are so many facts that are actually documented in the police report that you can go back and do an accident reconstruction and assess, okay, this is really what's happening. This is really what's going on with this case. And I can do a better job gathering facts and articulating truth, especially when I'm arguing a case on behalf of my client with an insurance company. So that's, you definitely want to try to get the police there, okay? And that's one thing, even when you have minor impacts. The law does provide a remedy in some circumstances, even with a $500 impact. It will, because under case law, there is a doctrine called eggshell plaintiff. Okay, they have to take you as you are. If you have prior conditions, and even a small impact can actually aggravate a prior condition. If you have prior disc bulges, you could be sitting kind of awkward inside the car, and even a small impact can jolt the car just enough to cause a whiplash. Just the physics of the body, even if the car goes forward, the back will go, the head will drop because the head's the heaviest part of the body, and then it will go next. And then sometimes back forward again. That's enough to actually cause whiplash and neck trauma. Rear end impacts aren't likely to cause lumbar, but they are known, depending on how the body moves, that it could aggravate lumbar pain or at least initiate something. You might have a disc bulge in your body, in your spine, that's asymptomatic. The slightest impact to the car can trigger it. Now you're going to pain the rest of your life, okay? Even with a minor impact. So that's why you definitely want to take the necessary steps to involve the appropriate people that can make sure, hey, the investigation's done properly so we can assess the facts. Rear end impacts, most likely it's the guy who hit you. Almost 99% of the time it's his fault. Okay, but there are circumstances where even if, let's just say an individual is rear-ended, it can still be that person's fault who was rear-ended. Arizona is a comparative fault state. So in many circumstances, you definitely want the facts out there. So in case that person lies and tries to put value on you, and the insurance company is now suing you, and now you have to arbitrate the case, and you have no independent investigation, just a he said, she said, you could be out money. Does that make sense? So, and another thing, I'll get your question. From the rules of evidence, anytime you talk to an insurance company, okay, anytime you say something, even to an individual you're in an accident with, you are now a party opponent if you're involved, or victim, or the person who causes that accident. Anything you say will and can be used against you, okay? It's not just in a criminal setting, but it's called an admission by a party opponent, okay? They can use that statement as evidence, even though statements from other parties, third parties, can't necessarily come in because of other evidentiary regulations. But so be careful what you say and who you say it to. I have had clients where they've reported to the insurance company that they were not injured. They did contact a lawyer a couple days later after the pain became onset. In many cases, they're not hurting right after the accident because of the shock. Your body's adrenaline is going, you're not feeling anything. But as soon as that subsides, you're going to start feeling it. Okay, not every time, but in many, many cases, that's the truth. When it comes to compensation, all right, you have liability. All right, that's in the event that you cause an accident and you're sued, you have liability, okay? And there's also what they call uninsured motorist. Okay, and there's also underinsured motorist. You guys know what these mean? This is first-party coverage. This is coverage to protect you in the event that he either doesn't have any insurance or doesn't have enough. Okay? So let's just say we sue somebody who causes damage to your vehicle, or we make a claim, and your bodily injury is significant. You have neck pain, you now have a disc bulge you didn't have before, or it was asymptomatic depending on the radiology reports. Now you're in pain and you need injections, steroidal injections in your neck to decompress the issue, or what if you need surgery now? Okay? So what happens, you sue this individual, and I'm going to tell you 99.9% out of the time that we handle these types of cases, the defendant who caused the accident, one, does not have any assets that you can pursue in court and get liquidated in the event that he doesn't have enough insurance. Okay, so that's why we go after the liability coverage. Once this policy is tapped out, the state minimum, unfortunately, in Arizona is a $1530, which means no person can take more than $15,000. Then they go up to $25, $50, $50, $100, or $100, $300, depending on the policies, or you can sometimes $1 million, depending on who the carrier or who's purchasing the policy. If they have a lot of assets, then they usually have $1 million, which is usually sufficient. If you have surgery, or let's just say if you lose a limb, that case is looking more towards $1 million, not $100,000. But if you were to cap out $100,000, which is very, very common with most middle class in Arizona, and even lower upper class, you see this policy quite often. You see these not as often as these and these. But if you have a severe injury and something that's going to be ongoing, you don't know when you're in that accident what your injury looks like or how long you're going to be treating. You can only speculate because you don't know what's going on in your body. And you go through a course of treatment, usually start out with a chiropractor. Their bills tend to cap out around $5,000 because if you need treatment beyond that, then it's beyond their expertise. You move on to the next doctor. You're already seeing a primary care. You're seeing a pain management doctor, which is an orthopedic doctor by then if you have something really serious going on. But we have to monitor as the lawyer because without knowing these limits, we have to monitor it and see, okay, you're accruing bills quick, especially if you're documenting your case. The one thing you want to realize is you're going to have to treat and document because the experts are the doctors. Okay, that's your expert testimony. That's what substantiates your whole case. And we utilize the doctors as experts to prove your case in terms of damages, what your injuries are. But say if you cap out this liability policy at 15, or let's just say 25, 50, or 100, and the value of the case is far more than that, or you have bills more than that, you're now making a claim under your underinsured or uninsured motorist, depending on how much you have on your policy. And in this state, I definitely encourage all of you guys to purchase uninsured or underinsured motorist for your own protection. There's not a lot of drivers that have large policies in Arizona, and on these streets, injuries tend to be significant. They can be. And if you are capped out on coverage and you can't sue that person because they don't have assets, you need additional coverage to protect yourself financially.
At what limits?
I personally have $100,000, $100,000, $300,000. Most injuries don't usually exceed that, but if you do have something significant, the injury could actually exceed that value. Most surgical cases cap out at about $100,000, meaning after surgery procedures, the bills usually aren't more than $50,000. You can cap them out at $100,000. Sometimes they're worth more than that. If you sever a limb, now there's a lot of factors that play into that as to what the value of that is. If you are, let's just say you play professional baseball and you lose an arm, the case value is more than $1 million easy because you now cannot do what you've been doing or making money doing what you've been doing your whole life. If you're a surgeon and you lose a hand or fingers and you can't be a surgeon anymore, case value goes up. I've had cases where kids have been degloved by dogs. I've had a variety of kind of accidents where we've had larger policies, $400,000 policies even. But I mean, I personally, depending on depending on your assets, on liability, you want to be protected. Okay, so if you have a lot of assets at home, there's the Homestead Act. Unless you have $120,000 in equity on your home, they can't take your primary residence. If you have more than that in equity, they could actually take your equity out of your house if you're sued for causing an accident. So depending on your financial situation, I would recommend definitely getting a larger policy. Okay? Uninsured, underinsured motorist, there's a significant amount of drivers that only have a $15,000 policy. So I personally recommend getting at least $100,000, just to protect you in the event that their coverage isn't enough. You sue them. Let's say you have $60,000 in bills. There's a $15,000 policy that caps out, and your bills are huge. You only have $15,000 to pay for it all. It's not going to happen. It's always good to call a lawyer first anytime you're in any kind of incident whatsoever to make sure that, hey, you're legally protected, because there are so many different intersections of the law on this subject. I just want to make sure that you guys have a general understanding. Every case is different. No case is the same. So just to make sure that you're fully equipped before you actually contact any insurance company, and the lawyers will do that for you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, absolutely. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.